Right?
Three times a charm, exactly. Well, we left off on the last one. Again, for those of you who listen in order, you know where we're going and where we came from. But for those of you who don't, just pick the numbered podcast before this one and pick up where we left off. But we had talked about having a great romantic relationship, and that one of the things that's a big plus in a great romantic relationship is a great sexual relationship.
Right.
Because the two of those are different. Romance
Yes.
and sex are not necessarily the same.
Right.
You can have a nice romantic relationship with a friend, and be in a romantic setting, but not have sex with them.
Right.
So you had mentioned something I thought was very interesting, and I want to think back about a podcast we did with Rose when she had mentioned she loves the mothering part and nurturing
Right.
and the like.
Yes.
But you had talked about
She said the mama.
the mama. She liked being the mama. So that's okay. And so in essence, you had talked about a level of training or nurturing when you talked about a previous relationship where he had gone to a hooker to learn the to-dos and not to-dos, and
Right.
another one later who had also done the same thing. So what do you think about the training process for men?
Well, it's really because how do you learn what to do?
Exactly.
So I thought, oh, of course, he was the best. I'd never find anyone better than him, and especially because he was trained by a hooker. And then when I found the older gentleman and he was actually better, I was shocked. But, especially he was older than my parents. I mean, probably when I was with him, we were like 20, 25 years apart.
Wow. Yeah.
And he,
So there's hope for me then, right?
there is hope for everyone. And he actually, again, was trained by a private hooker. And just absolutely amazing, like very spontaneous. And like we'd look into a honeymoon suite and have like a quickie, and like he owned a couple restaurants, and he'd always want me to come grab a bite, but then he'd whisk me in the back, and it was always
Yes,
like
right.
something exciting.
Yes.
But then this one is by far the best lover in the, I mean,
Okay, now before you get to this one, because we all want to hear about how you grew into the best now. But the previous relationships, a couple of things that I wanted to mention was that if a hooker trains a guy on the things to do with, not all women are the same.
Right.
They're similar,
right.
but they're not all the same. So some of the things that she would think that a woman would enjoy are not necessarily the things that women enjoy. It depends on a lot of
Each
things.
person,
Yeah,
exactly.
Each person.
Yes.
So when you said you had a great first lover who thought, oh my gosh, nobody could be better than this.
Right.
And then later in life, you had one who was decidedly better
Right.
than that. Was that because he was better at the same things, or he knew new things?
He knew things, exactly.
He knew things.
Yep.
That's right.
And I mean, when you really think about it, hookers would make you feel like everything you're doing is the best.
Absolutely.
And so these people probably just took them under their wings and really taught them how to please a woman. So that is the key.
Now that's important because I've said before in previous podcasts that I think it's extremely important for a woman to know what pleases her
Right.
and know how to please herself before
Because
she's...
men are kind of easy.
Men are easy. They're kind of easy. Oh my gosh, men are easy.
Right.
It's pretty easy to make a guy happy. Now, the thing is that as you grow and you become more experienced and discerning in your relationships, it's not quite the same because there is a difference between good sex and sex. There is a
Right.
difference between good anything and just anything.
Yes.
Very, very, very much so. But
And what's sad is a lot of times when you're married or in a relationship, you're thinking about, the bills that have to be paid or what you're making for
Right,
dinner or,
right.
When the kids have to be picked up instead of just being in the moment and enjoying the sexual experience.
And it's very difficult to just throw somebody down on the kitchen floor
Right.
and have a spontaneous moment when the kids are running around
Right.
and it's time for dinner.
Yeah, kind of
So,
impossible.
Yeah, there are some drawbacks. So now we're to where you are now, and you had said that you have arrived at the perfect and most wonderful,
The most amazing man in the world. But what's funny is here I started very, very early in life, dating, having little boyfriends to serious relationships, and he didn't have his first date till he was 27.
First date.
First date.
What was
First,
what was he doing?
I don't know, because he's so gorgeous, like, oh my goodness. But he thumbed through a few books. One is called She Comes First. And then they had, I think the author wrote 3 different books, and the second one is He Comes Next.
Well, let me ask you
Do
this
you know
question.
these? Yeah.
No, but I know the concept.
Okay.
because quite frankly, since women can, quote, come often,
Right.
then having them come first is really not a big loss to a guy. It's an
Right.
advantage because she can do it
Totally.
again and again and again. Once she gets
Exactly.
ramped up and starts going,
Right.
it gets easier and easier. Whereas a guy, a lot of times if he does, he's done for a little while.
Yeah.
And so he has to shut down and recoup, but she can keep going. In fact, it gets better and better.
Yes.
So that's the She Comes First, He Comes Next.
And,
It's
he
concept.
said he just thumbed through it, but it actually has, I mean, I think everyone should read this. I wish I knew the author, but
Yeah, you can Google it.
yes,
So
exactly.
it's actually called She Comes First,
Right.
and then the other one's called He Comes
I
Next.
think He Comes
Comes
Next.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Well,
this
they can
really
Google it.
says a lot of different information that I was not even aware of. Because I thought from these 2 very experienced gentlemen, I learned everything I'd ever learned sexually in life.
Okay. The information, like what kind of information did you not know of? That's if you don't mind. Oh boy.
Well, I mean, like what you were saying, but it, like in the book, I think it's called squirting, and
Yes.
like things like I never was aware of any of this.
Right.
So he actually opened up my eyes and doors in a lot of different areas that I didn't know about.
Yeah, we talked about that. You and I talked about a couple of areas, again, so we can familiarize ourselves with our life stories so we know what we're going to, pretty much the things we were going to talk about. And one of the things
And you
that
sound just as experienced as me, if not more.
yeah, well, I would challenge, I would challenge anybody's experience, and I'm willing to, compete with anybody for whatever it is that they know in terms of life experiences, because I've lived a life. So one of the things that I did mention to you, and we were talking about subjects. We were talking about women who can spray or they experience a female ejaculation, and a lot of women never heard of that. A lot of
Right.
men never heard of that.
Right.
And that's okay. And
Because I did not know this was possible.
Sure. Most people don't unless they either experience it or they watch some porn movie or they heard
Which,
of it. Yeah.
again, that was all new to me.
Yeah, yeah. And so I had learned from a woman who was very free-spirited that she knew how to masturbate herself. She knew how to please herself, and she discovered how to push that button, almost literally a button, and we've talked about that in a previous podcast, that it's almost literally a button, and where it's located inside, at least one of the ways to get that gland stimulated, so then it just
Right.
sprays like, crazy. But she learned how to do that by pleasing herself, learning how to please herself. And then eventually she could tell a guy, by the way, if you do this, this
Exactly.
will happen.
Well, it's even with men doing the prostate stimulator. I mean, then they would not get prostate cancer. So, see, sex has so much beneficial things for our future.
Wow. See, then we should just open up a medical practice and just do all the advices, the hormonal advices for women and for men.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it'd be a fun challenge. So, okay, so you learned then in that he thumbed through that book and he found out
Right.
some things that are very interesting. And were they very helpful in terms of getting him to physically be able to do those things? Because it's like
So with
manual.
him, he's the kind of man that makes sure you have the first sip of anything or that you're comfortable.
Yes.
So that's how he is sexually too. And it's more like making sure that you're comfortable, happy. That's the whole thing. Thinking of your partner before yourself.
And that's a patience thing that I think, I'm not going to say across the board that men learn as they get older, but the patience part about when you're young, you want immediate gratification. You're
Right.
not so patient.
Yes.
But when you get older, you are not only willing to, but you see the benefit in having a longer term relationship, pleasing her. I think that if you have a relationship with a woman and she gets off, and you get her off again, and you get her off again, you haven't yet. You get her off again. She's not really going to say, "I'm done." Yeah, I'm done. Why don't you go watch some sports? She's going to continue. She's going to say, "Oh my God, that was really nice. I really enjoyed that. I'd like some more of that."
Right.
You know, especially if she doesn't have to give up anything. You know, I like some more of that. And I think that it is a nice thing to be able to give that to a woman,
Right.
because if you're a guy who's been in a lot of relationships, have been with a lot of different women, you're always getting off, because it's pretty easy for a guy to,
Exactly.
you know, it's pretty easy.
But if you're continually feeling good and having that oxytocin in our brain, then that it's almost like taking antidepressant. So it's going to make this pheromone inside us a happier person. So I think that is so important in life.
Yeah, yeah, and it changes a lot of things. It changes your mood and all. So you had mentioned romance, add romance, find that spark, find the fun thing between you and he that you can share, whether it's
Whatever it is.
travel
Yep.
or music or
Movies or-
movies. Yeah,
Shopping, we never shop together, but I mean, some people like that. That's
yeah. I
good.
draw the line right there.
Yeah, right.
Draw the line with the shopping thing. Yeah.
Right.
No, I just think the guys don't really enjoy shopping too
Right,
much. But
yeah.
it's
And they shouldn't you shouldn't be tortured.
no.
Like, why should we make you do something you don't like
Go
to
with
do?
your girlfriends and shop.
Exactly.
You know, that's if you want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So we're all trying to learn how to communicate with each other. And I think that the essential component of all of these things that we've talked about are being able to sit down and talk with your partner.
See, I don't know. We don't talk that much.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's all telepathy.
I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, I'm open to kind of everything for him. And he's, through time, been open to letting me do whatever I want to.
So wait a minute, aren't there, and I don't mean to get into your personal business, but are there things that you do, let's see how I can phrase this so it's not personal. Are there things that you do with him that you had never done before with
yeah.
anyone else?
Definitely.
And how did you pose that? How did you just start doing it and he just
How
assumes it's going
did
to be okay
we pose
with you?
that? How, I don't even know how the first time was.
Nobody
Yeah.
said anything? Nobody said,
Yeah, weird, right?
have you ever tried this or have you ever done that?
Yeah. Because definitely, I've done things with him I would never even think of doing with anyone else.
Yeah, and I know that feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're in a relationship with someone that you've done things with them that you had never even thought of doing
Right.
with someone else and enjoyed it, you know,
Right.
then that's a big plus. I do have a quick maybe regression. I was in a relationship. A long-term relationship with a woman who her previous husband had introduced a third party to their relationship, and she accepted, she acquiesced, and she said, and I
Was
said,
it a girl or a guy?
well, that's a good thing. That's a good question. And so the funny thing was that I said, was it a girl or a guy? And she said, well, the first one was a girl. And I
the
said,
first
oh, well, how was that? She said, well, it was kind of different, you know. But she said, I liked it because she's aggressive. She's an aggressive lover. So when she had a female introduced into the relationship, she could be aggressive toward her. And she said, I kind of like that. That was kind of fun. And I said, oh, that's great. And said, then he introduced a male partner. And then when he did, she said, I asked him, I said, are you sure you want to do this? And,
Right.
you know, and she said, and I said, well, why did you do it? She said, well, I thought it would make him happy.
Funny.
And so she did it, and then she had a few other relationships, similar situations with that husband, and I think that it started to separate them
Yeah.
a bit.
And I feel, this is my beliefs, that that other person would just be in the way.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's just it's distracting, but that's just me, and I'm not
Unless
being
they're holding
judgmental.
the light and the camera, we don't need them.
Yeah,
No,
right.
I'm kidding you.
Exactly. And a towel, you know, dapping your forehead. But I get that, and I think, in my opinion, that it would just be a distraction, and it would
Yes.
take my focus off of the
Right.
person I want to focus on. And then I don't really need all that extra stimulation.
Right.
I get plenty of stimulation from that
Yeah.
one person. It's one-on-one. So I just I do want to make sure that we have more conversations as we go forward with He Said, She Said, and they include all sorts of other, let's see, other advice or suggestions from women just like everybody else, and from men, hopefully me, just like every other guy in a sense, and that we're